Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., the elevator in the building stopped on the same floor. The strange part was, the building only had 12 floors. The empty building. Victor Hayes had always preferred working at night. The quiet suited him. No crowds, no conversations, just silence. For the past 4 years, Victor had worked as the night security guard for Ridgeway Tower, a 15-story office building in the center of the city. During the day, the place was alive. Lawyers rushing through the lobby, phones ringing in every office, elevators constantly moving between floors. But after midnight, everything changed. The lights dimmed, the hallways emptied, and the entire building felt like a giant concrete shell. Victor's shift started at 11 p.m. every night. His job was simple: check the cameras, walk the floors, make sure no one was still inside. Most nights passed slowly, almost boring. Victor usually spent the quiet hours drinking coffee and watching the security monitors. Nothing ever happened until the night the elevator stopped. It was 3:17 a.m. Victor remembered the exact time because the digital clock on the security desk changed the moment it happened. 3:16. 3:17. A soft ding echoed from the elevator shaft. Victor looked up at the monitor. The elevator doors had opened. He frowned. The building should have been empty. Every tenant left before midnight. Victor leaned closer to the screen. The hallway camera showed no one. Just the elevator doors sliding open slowly, then closing again. Victor glanced at the elevator panel on the camera feed. The floor number displayed above the doors read 13. Victor sat up straight. That's strange. He grabbed the building directory beside the desk. It clearly listed the floors. Lobby. 10, 11, 12. Victor stared at the list. There was no floor 13. The building had been designed without it. Like many old buildings, it skipped the number entirely. Victor looked back at the screen. The elevator doors were now closed again. The floor display flickered once, then changed. 12. Victor frowned. That's not possible. He rewound the security footage. The video played again. The elevator moved upward. 11. 12. Then 13. The doors opened. Victor felt a chill run down his spine. The hallway looked normal. But, according to the building plans, that hallway should not exist. Victor sat back slowly. Probably a system glitch. Old buildings had strange electrical problems sometimes. Victor tried to ignore it. But the next night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the elevator stopped again. And once again. The display showed 13. The night Victor took the elevator. Victor tried to ignore it. For 2 nights in a row, the elevator had stopped on a floor that shouldn't exist. But the third night, the curiosity was too strong. Victor sat alone at the security desk, staring at the wall of monitors. The building was silent again. Just the quiet hum of electricity running through the walls. He glanced at the clock. 3:15 a.m. 2 minutes. Victor leaned back in his chair. This is ridiculous, he muttered. There had to be a simple explanation. Maybe the elevator system had an old maintenance code. Maybe the panel was glitching. Or maybe the security camera was misreading the floor number. Still, the thought bothered him, because the hallway camera clearly showed doors opening, and there was no hallway above floor 12. Victor looked back at the clock. 3:16 a.m. 1 minute. He stood up. If it happens again, Victor grabbed his flashlight from the desk. I'm checking it myself. The seconds passed slowly. Then, 3:17 a.m. The sound echoed through the empty lobby. Ding! Victor's heart skipped. He turned to the monitor. The elevator doors opened. And once again, the display above the doors read, 13. Victor exhaled slowly. All right. He grabbed his radio and walked toward the elevator. The lobby lights flickered slightly as he approached. The doors were still open. The inside of the elevator looked completely normal. Polished metal walls. Soft overhead lighting. The digital floor display glowing red. Victor stepped inside. He looked at the buttons. The highest number was still 12. Number 13. Victor pressed 12. The doors closed. The elevator began moving upward. The mechanical hum echoed through the shaft. Victor watched the numbers change. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Then, the elevator stopped. The display read 12. The doors opened. Victor stepped out. The hallway was empty. Everything looked normal. Just rows of office doors and dim lighting. Victor walked a few steps down the corridor. Nothing unusual. He turned back toward the elevator. See, he pressed the call button again. The elevator doors opened immediately. Victor stepped inside. He sighed. Just a glitch. He pressed lobby. But the elevator didn't move. Victor frowned. What? The panel flickered. Then the display changed. The number 12 disappeared. Slowly? A new number appeared. 13. Victor felt the air grow colder. The elevator began moving again. But this time, it was going up. Victor stared at the panel. That's impossible. There was no floor above 12. The elevator slowed, then stopped. Ding. The doors opened. Victor slowly looked up. The hallway outside was dim, but it was there. A floor that didn't exist. Victor stepped out cautiously. The lights flickered softly overhead. The hallway stretched into darkness. Office doors lined the walls, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. Victor walked forward slowly. The carpet beneath his shoes was covered in dust. Like no one had walked there in years. He tried the first office door. It creaked open slowly. Inside, the room was empty. Just an old desk. A broken computer monitor, and a calendar hanging on the wall. Victor stepped closer. The calendar was still open, the date circled in red ink. Victor felt his stomach tighten. The date was today, but the year written on the calendar was 20 years in the future. Victor whispered quietly, "What is this place?" Suddenly, behind him, the elevator doors slammed shut. Victor spun around. "Wait!" He ran toward the elevator, but the doors were already closed. The display above them changed. 13. Then, slowly, it changed again. 12. The elevator was leaving. Victor pounded on the doors. "Hey!" The elevator moved downward, leaving him alone on the impossible floor. Victor turned slowly back toward the dark hallway, and that's when he heard it. Footsteps. Soft. Slow, coming from somewhere in the darkness ahead. Victor whispered to himself, "Someone else is here." And then, a voice spoke from the end of the hallway. A voice that sounded exactly like his. "Victor, you weren't supposed to come here." The man in the hallway. Victor stood frozen in the dim hallway. The elevator had disappeared. And the voice he had just heard, it had sounded exactly like his own. The air on the strange floor felt colder than the rest of the building. Victor slowly turned toward the darkness at the end of the corridor. "Hello?" he called out. His voice echoed against the empty walls. No answer, but the feeling remained. Someone was there. Watching him. Victor tightened his grip on the flashlight and switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness ahead. Dust floated in the air like tiny silver particles. The hallway stretched farther than any of the floors below. Too far. The building wasn't that big. Victor whispered to himself, "This floor shouldn't exist." The voice came again, soft, calm. "Victor." Victor's heart pounded. "Who's there?" The voice didn't answer immediately. Instead, footsteps echoed from deeper in the hallway. Slow, measured. Victor lifted the flashlight higher. The beam moved across the corridor. Office doors, old desks, broken chairs. Everything looked abandoned, as if no one had used this floor for decades. Then the footsteps stopped. Victor swallowed. "Show yourself." Silence. Victor took another step forward. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his hand. Then, a figure stepped into the light. Victor's breath caught. The man standing there looked exactly like him. Same height, same face, same security uniform. Victor whispered, "What?" The other man stared back at him, but his expression was different. Older. Tired. Like someone who hadn't slept in years. The other Victor spoke quietly. "I was hoping you wouldn't come." Victor's mind raced. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly. "You already know." Victor shook his head. "No." The man sighed. "I'm you." Victor felt his stomach twist. "That's impossible." The other Victor stepped closer. "Is it?" Victor raised the flashlight again. "What is this place?" The other Victor looked down the hallway. "This," he paused, "is the floor where the elevator takes people who stay too curious." Victor frowned. "That doesn't make sense." The other Victor gave a tired smile. "It will." Victor glanced toward the elevator doors behind him. The display above them was dark now. "No way back?" The other Victor shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." Victor felt panic rising. "What do you mean, not anymore?" The other Victor pointed to the elevator shaft. "You got off on the wrong floor." Victor's chest tightened. "You said the elevator brings curious people here." "Yes." Victor stared at him. "So how do we leave?" The other Victor didn't answer. Instead, he looked down the hallway again. Victor noticed something, strange. The older version of himself looked frightened. "Leave?" the other Victor said softly. "You don't leave." Victor's heart began racing. "What?" The other Victor spoke slowly. "You replace." Victor's mind struggled to understand. "Replace what?" The other Victor pointed toward the elevator doors. "The next one." Victor frowned. "The next one?" The older Victor nodded. "Someone else will get curious someday." Victor felt a cold wave pass through his body. "They'll ride the elevator too." The older Victor looked directly into his eyes. "And when they arrive," Victor's voice trembled, "they take my place." The older Victor nodded. "And I finally leave." Victor stepped back. "No." The older Victor's voice was calm. "That's how it works." Victor shook his head. "I'm not staying here." The older Victor sighed. "That's what I said too." Victor suddenly turned and ran toward the elevator. He slammed the call button. Nothing happened. The display remained dark. Victor pounded on the doors. "Come on." Behind him. The other Victor spoke quietly. "It only comes once." Victor stopped. "What?" The older Victor leaned against the wall. "At 3:17 a.m.? Victor's chest tightened. "That's hours from now." The other Victor nodded. "Exactly." Victor slowly turned around. "How long have you been here?" The older Victor hesitated. Then he answered, "I stopped counting." Victor felt his heart pounding again. "But someone had to bring you here." The older Victor nodded slowly. "Yes," Victor whispered. "Another version of you?" The older Victor looked down the hallway again. "No," Victor frowned. "Then who?" The older Victor's face suddenly grew serious. "Not who?" Victor felt his stomach twist. "What do you mean?" The older Victor pointed slowly toward the darkness behind them. Victor followed his gaze, and that's when Victor realized something terrifying. The hallway wasn't empty anymore. Dozens of office doors were now slightly open, and from each dark doorway, someone was watching. Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. "Those people—" The older Victor shook his head, slowly. "They're not people." Victor's chest tightened. "What are they?" The older Victor answered quietly. "They're the ones who press the button." The doors that should stay closed. Victor's flashlight trembled slightly in his hand. He slowly turned the beam toward the doors lining the hallway. Each office door was slightly open, just enough for someone to look through. Or something. Victor whispered, Those are people." The older Victor shook his head slowly. "No." Victor swallowed. "Then what are they?" The older Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed his chin toward the nearest door. "Look closer." Victor hesitated. Everything in his body told him not to move. But curiosity, that same curiosity that had brought him here, pulled him forward. Victor stepped slowly toward the closest office door. The flashlight beam illuminated the inside of the room. At first, it looked empty. Just an old desk and chair covered in dust. But then something moved. Victor froze. A figure slowly leaned forward from the darkness inside the office. Its face came into the light. Victor felt his stomach drop. The man looked normal. Almost. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The man's eyes were wide open. Too wide. And he wasn't blinking. Victor whispered, "Are you okay?" The figure tilted its head, slowly, unnaturally. Then it spoke. Its voice sounded dry, like it hadn't spoken in years. "You came early." Victor stepped back quickly. The older Victor grabbed his arm. "Don't talk to them," Victor whispered. "What are they?" The older Victor looked down the hallway again. "They're what happens when someone stays here too long." Victor felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean there were people?" The older Victor nodded slowly. "Once." Victor looked back towards the office. The man inside was still staring, still not blinking. Then something even stranger happened. The man smiled, but the smile stretched too far across his face, like someone who had forgotten how smiles were supposed to work. Victor turned away quickly. "That's not human." The older Victor nodded. "That's what happens when you wait too long for the elevator." Victor's voice trembled slightly. You said the elevator comes at 3:17? Yes. Victor checked his watch. It was only 3:29 a.m. He exhaled slowly. So, we wait until tomorrow. The older Victor laughed quietly. A tired laugh. You think that's how it works? Victor frowned. What do you mean? The older Victor pointed toward the ceiling. Time doesn't move the same way here. Victor's stomach tightened. How long is a day? The older Victor shrugged. Sometimes hours. He paused. Sometimes years. Victor stared at him. You're joking. The older Victor's eyes were serious. I wish I was. Victor suddenly heard something behind them. A door creaking open. Then another. Then another. Victor slowly turned around. The hallway had changed. More doors were opening. The figures inside were stepping out. Dozens of them. Men. Women. All with the same blank expressions. All staring directly at Victor. The older Victor whispered urgently, Don't let them surround you. Victor's heart began pounding. Why? The older Victor grabbed his shoulder. Because they don't want you to leave. Victor looked back at him. What do they want? The older Victor answered quietly. They want you to stay. Victor looked down the hallway again. The figures were slowly moving closer. Their footsteps echoed softly. None of them blinked. None of them spoke. Victor whispered, How many people have come here? The older Victor looked around the corridor. More than the building could ever hold. Victor's voice dropped. Then, where do they all go? The older Victor pointed toward the dark end of the hallway. Victor followed his finger. At the far end, there was another elevator. Victor frowned. There's another one? The older Victor nodded. That one, he hesitated, doesn't go back down. Victor's chest tightened. Then where does it go? The older Victor whispered the answer. Somewhere worse. The figures continued moving closer. Victor could hear them breathing now. Slow. Dry breaths. Victor's heart pounded. What do we do? The older Victor looked toward the elevator behind them. We survive until 3:17 a.m. Victor nodded. That's when it comes. Yes, Victor whispered. And when it does, the older Victor finished the sentence. Only one of us leaves. Victor stared at him. What? The older Victor looked away. That's the rule. Victor felt panic rising. You never said that before. The older Victor's voice was quiet. Because I was hoping you wouldn't ask. The figures were now only a few steps away. Victor tightened his grip on the flashlight. His voice trembled slightly. If only one person leaves. He looked at the older version of himself. Who decides? The older Victor slowly raised his eyes and said something that made Victor's blood run cold. The elevator does. The elevator's choice. The hallway had grown silent. Too silent. Victor stood beside the older version of himself, both of them staring at the crowd slowly forming around them. The figures had stopped moving. They simply stood there, watching. Their pale eyes fixed on Victor like predators waiting for something to happen. Victor checked his watch again. 3:14 a.m. 3 minutes. His heart beat faster. So when it arrives, Victor whispered. What happens? The older Victor kept his eyes on the dark elevator doors behind them. The same thing that always happens. Victor frowned. And that is? The older Victor answered quietly. The elevator decides who gets to leave. Victor shook his head. That doesn't make sense. The older Victor sighed. It doesn't have to. Victor looked back at the figures surrounding them. Why are they waiting? The older Victor lowered his voice. Because they know. Victor swallowed. They know what? The older Victor's eyes flicked toward the elevator. That someone is leaving tonight. Victor felt a cold weight settle in his chest. But you said only one person leaves. Yes. Victor's voice grew tight. So what happens to the other one? The older Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. Victor already knew. The hallway lights flickered. The figures shifted slightly. Victor checked his watch again. 3:16 a.m. 1 minute. The air inside the impossible floor suddenly felt heavier, like the entire hallway was holding its breath. Victor whispered, I'm not staying here. The older Victor gave a sad smile. That's exactly what I said when I first arrived. Victor looked at him. How long have you been here? The older Victor stared at the dusty floor. Long enough to forget what sunlight looks like. Victor felt a knot tighten in his chest. He couldn't imagine being trapped here for years, or with decades. Victor suddenly heard a sound. A faint mechanical rumble. The elevator shaft behind them vibrated softly. The older Victor straightened. It's coming. Victor turned toward the doors. The display above the elevator flickered to life. For a moment, the screen was blank. Then, slowly, a number appeared. 13. Victor's heart slammed in his chest. The figures around them began stepping closer again. Their breathing filled the hallway. The elevator slowed, then stopped. Ding! The doors slid open. Inside the elevator, the lights were brighter than before. Too bright. Victor squinted, and then he noticed something strange. There was already someone standing inside. A man. He wore the same security uniform. Victor felt his stomach drop. The man looked exactly like him, but younger. Confused, just like Victor had been when he first arrived. The younger Victor stepped forward. Where am I? The older Victor whispered softly. That's you. Victor shook his head. No. The older Victor nodded. That's the version of you who hasn't stepped off the elevator yet. Victor stared in disbelief. The younger Victor inside the elevator looked around nervously. Hello? Victor felt his mind spinning. How is that possible? The older Victor gave a tired smile. Time loops here. Victor looked back toward the elevator. The younger Victor stepped out slowly. The moment his foot touched the hallway floor, the elevator display changed. 13:12. Victor's heart pounded. The doors began to close. The older Victor grabbed him suddenly. Now. Victor stumbled toward the elevator. What about him? He shouted, pointing to the younger version of himself. The older Victor shook his head. He's already part of the loop. Victor hesitated. The doors were almost closed. The figures in the hallway began moving again. Faster this time. Reaching, whispering. Victor heard them calling his name. Victor! 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 The older Victor pushed him forward. Go! Victor lunged into the elevator. The doors slammed shut. The hallway vanished. The last thing Victor saw was the older version of himself standing in the crowd, surrounded, waiting. The elevator began descending. Victor's heart pounded as the numbers changed. 13, 12, 10, 8, 5. Then, finally, lobby. Ding! The doors open. Victor stumbled out into the quiet lobby. Everything looked normal. Bright lights. Empty chairs. The security desk exactly where he had left it. Victor turned around slowly. The elevator display read 12. Victor whispered to himself, "It's over." But as he walked back to the security desk, something caught his eye. The elevator panel flickered once. Then the number slowly changed. 1213. Victor felt his blood run cold, because he suddenly realized something horrifying. The elevator hadn't freed him. It had simply chosen the next replacement. And that was the story of the elevator that stops on a floor that doesn't exist. But imagine this for a moment. If you were alone in a building late at night, and the elevator stopped on a floor that shouldn't exist, would you step out, or would you stay inside? Let me know what you would do in the comments. And if you enjoy dark mysteries, eerie stories, and chilling truths, subscribe to ASHEN Truths, because sometimes curiosity opens doors that should never be opened. Thank you.